Hey everybody, Adam Davidson, RadCast for Tuesday, March 21, 2023. Here's a passage from Mark chapter 5, verse 6. When he, meaning this man who was demon-possessed, saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you impure spirit." And that's the word of the Lord. Yesterday on RadCast, we talked about Mark chapter 5, the same story, the earlier section, and I got a message from somebody, and I wanted to bring it to our time together today because I think it's really important. First of all, anytime you have anything you want to say or share, anything you can do to make this dialogical so that it's not just another egg presenting information on the internet, let's do that. Let's make this like a community thing where we talk with each other. It makes it way more fun for me anyway, and it means that we're talking about things that are actually relevant. So this friend writes, "Hey, I hope you can shed some light on today's Mark 5 message today. I hit a speed bump as I listened to you read Mark's demon possession story and relate it to spiritual battles between good and evil and looking to Jesus for help." She says, "As I listened, the nurse, the RN in me, in today's world saw a man with mental illness disorders such as schizophrenia, with cutting and suicidal tendencies, things that Bible writers of yesteryear knew nothing about and could not logically comprehend." So basically she's saying, is this really just a case of mental health issues? And if you think about it, you got this man who can't be bound with a chain, nobody strong enough to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out to himself and cut with stones. Well, we see these things today, and many of those are, you're right, symptoms of mental health. And she finishes writing, she says, I have a hard time with this passage. I'm not sure I'd be drawn to putting on the armor of God. Do you believe mental illnesses are spiritual battles? Can you speak to this? Great question. So, mental illness and spiritual battles are two different things. I mean, of course, if we're dealing with mental illness, there is a spiritual battle aspect to it, just like there is in any other physical ailment, but mental illness is a physical ailment. It is not to always be chalked up merely to the spiritual. And many times, even in the church today, somebody who's dealing with depression or anxiety or suicidal tendencies is told to just pray it away and throw some Bible verses at them. Now, we need the scripture, we need God's truth, but we also need medical help, and there's no shame in that. So we should make that clear that this is not a case of someone with mental illness just being sprayed with some holy water and hoping it all gets better. That's not the case here. And here's how we know, all right? Again, great question. When we see later in the story that this man who's demon-possessed sees Jesus and says, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me," that is an indicator that, yes, we are dealing with a spiritual manifestation, because somebody who's dealing with a mental health issue would likely not recognize this rabbi as Jesus the Messiah and beg for mercy right away. I mean, it's not impossible, but clearly there is a spiritual thing going on that we cannot see with our eyes. So that's the first indicator that this is different from a mental health issue. The second indicator is in their conversation, which we'll get to in the rest of this week, so stick around with me on RadCast. We'll talk more about that later. But clearly, this is not a mental health issue. And I'm so glad that somebody texted me, because my boys asked about it yesterday morning at the breakfast table too. And I said, had this been a mental health issue, this is just my take on it, the writer of the Gospel of Mark, whose name is Mark, probably would have just chalked it up to a healing. This is different. This is different. Last but not least, the church fathers, and this is some research I did this morning because I was so glad that this person asked this question. The church fathers, the old guys who were the early writers of the church, they generally view both mentally ill people and the demon-possessed with compassion and even at times admiration. Why? Well, because whether we're talking about demon possession or mental illness, which are two different things, they are absolutely a difficult, terrible thing for us sometimes. And so the church fathers would look on folks who were struggling with compassion, because this is just an example of how our world is broken. And sometimes even admiration, which is very bizarre, but you have to remember that suffering is different in the Bible. The way that we view it and the role that it plays in our spiritual formation is just profoundly different. So we're going to leave it there. We're out of time, my friends. But thank you so much, Debbie, for asking that question, and thanks everybody for hanging out with us today. And my prayer is that you would have mental health, medical mental health, that your brain chemistry would be healthy and right, And conversely, on a different table entirely, my prayer for all of us is that we would put on the full armor of God and realize that we are in a spiritual battlefield and that Jesus is victorious. That just as that demon says, please, please don't torture me, we are dealing with a Messiah who has incredible power over things that we don't even usually care about. So go in the victory, go in the peace, be humble with me, and we'll see you tomorrow. That's RadCast.